Have you ever wondered what truly matters when everything is about to end? I'm not talking about just any decision, the kind we make every day between coffee or tea, between watching another episode or going to sleep. I'm talking about that moment when the body fails, the doctors exchange worried glances, and you realize, with frightening clarity, that perhaps this is the last chance to settle accounts with life. It is in that instant, when death ceases to be a distant concept and becomes a real presence beside the hospital bed, that we discover who we truly are. If you could go back in time and undo a choice that changed the course of everything, would you have the courage? Because the story I'm about to tell isn't about empty regret or silent remorse. It's about a promise made under the weight of extreme fragility at a moment when all the power, all the fortune, and all the prestige built up over decades simply ceased to mean anything. Stay with me until the end, because what you're about to discover might make you rethink your own choices. Imagine a private hospital room, one of those with a city view, state-of-the-art equipment, and nurses available 24 hours a day. But none of that matters when the heart fails. In that bed lay someone who moved fortunes, commanded companies, decided the fate of hundreds of people with a signature. Someone accustomed to having control over everything and everyone. Except that now, connected to tubes and wires, that control had evaporated. And it was precisely in this moment of total vulnerability that something unexpected emerged, an old love, a love that should never have been forgotten, but which the ambitions and right choices of life had buried long ago. Have you ever been through this? Ever had the feeling that you let something truly important slip away while chasing goals that seemed essential? Well, that was exactly the feeling that dominated that room in that silent early morning. And when she appeared, sat in that uncomfortable chair and held that weak hand, something changed. It wasn't just the heart monitor that reacted. It was something much deeper, a painful realization that her entire life had been built on decisions that benefited everyone but her own conscience. It was there, between intermittent lucidity and the fear of not waking up the next day, that the promise was born. A promise that had nothing to do with religion or desperate pleas for more time. It was something different. It was a commitment made to the only person whose opinion still truly mattered, the only one capable of seeing beyond the facade of success and perceiving the deep cracks that money had never been able to patch. And what was promised at that moment had the power to destroy everything that had been built, to turn a reputation inside out, to transform allies into enemies, and to expose truths that had been buried for decades. But here's the twist you might not be expecting. The person survived, against all medical predictions, against the grim statistics. The heart began beating strongly enough for a few more years. And that's where the real dilemma began, because a promise made on the brink of death carries a weight that no excuse can alleviate. What you're about to discover may surprise you, because this isn't a story about easy happy endings or instant redemptions. Before we continue, I need to tell you something. If this topic resonates with you, if you've ever felt the weight of a difficult choice or the regret of leaving something important behind, leave a comment below about what has touched you the most so far. It can be a word, a phrase, or even a personal story. Seriously, I read every comment, and that's exactly what shows me that this type of content really matters. Your participation here is what makes this channel grow and reach more people who are also looking for something beyond empty entertainment, you know? And if you haven't subscribed to the channel yet, now's the time, because what comes next will show you that the hardest decisions are always the ones that reveal who we really are. Oh, and leave a like too, because it helps this video reach those who most need to hear this message. Now, let me tell you what happened when that person returned home, when the tubes were removed, when the routine of normal life tried to erase the intensity of that moment in the hospital. Now I want to delve even deeper into this subject, because something fascinating is happening here. Think about it. What truly separates a powerful person from an ordinary person when both are lying in a hospital bed? The hidden truth is that absolutely nothing. No power can hold its breath when it fails. No fortune can negotiate another minute when the body decides to stop. And it is precisely this brutal realization that triggers a profound transformation in the mindset of those who go through this. Suddenly, all those endless meetings, those billion-dollar contracts, that obsession with being at the top of the pyramid simply melt like ice under the sun. What remains is a chilling question. Was it worth it? Behind the scenes of that hospital room, while machines beeped, marking each irregular heartbeat, there was an almost cruel contrast. Outside, the empire continued to function. Executives made decisions, stocks rose and fell, emails were sent, meetings took place. But inside, in that small space that smelled of antiseptic and fear, none of that mattered. Lifetime's journey built on ambition, strategy, and calculated decisions was being questioned by a single truth. When everything can end in a second, what truly remains? And it was in that moment of painful clarity, when the impact of one's own mortality hit with full force, that the secret began to take shape. Because that promise wasn't born from a religious impulse or superficial repentance. It arose from something much more visceral, the desperate need to fix what was wrong before it was too late. But there's a twist to this story that I haven't told you yet, and it changes everything. Because in the midst of that chaos of doctors, nurses, and machines fighting to keep someone alive, a person appeared who shouldn't have been there. She wasn't close family. She wasn't on the list of heirs. She didn't even have official authorization to enter that hospital floor. But somehow, every single day, there she was, sitting in that uncomfortable plastic chair, holding a hand that no longer had the strength to squeeze back. And you know what's most impressive? This silent presence, this simple gesture of being there, was capable of provoking a transformation more profound than any medicine or medical procedure. She was someone from the past, a love that had been buried decades ago under layers of practical decisions, convenient marriages, and choices that seemed right at the time. One of those relationships that life separates not because the feeling ceased to exist, but because the timing was never favorable, because the circumstances were too complicated, because it was easier to move on than to fight against everything and everyone. But now they're in that moment where only raw truth remained. All those justifications seemed ridiculously small. The gestures were minimal, but carried immense weight. A damp handkerchief wiped across a feverish forehead. Music playing softly on a cell phone, the same song they danced to one summer night 30 years ago. Words whispered in each other's ears when the pain became unbearable, words no one else heard, but which had the power to soothe what no medicine could reach. This emotional impact, this connection that defied all logic, was what humanized someone who had spent decades being seen only as a money-making machine. And it was precisely in that moment of total vulnerability, when all the masks fell and only the naked truth remained, that the words came out. It wasn't an elaborate speech. There was no rehearsed drama. It was just a hoarse, almost inaudible voice, fighting for its own breath to say what had been stuck inside for decades. The promise that would change everything, with his eyes fixed on her, knowing that those could be the last conscious words he would utter, came the confession. Everything I built was at the expense of those I betrayed. You know that. I know that. If I survive this night, I will fix it. Even if it costs me everything. Think about the gravity of this. It wasn't a vague promise to be a better person or to change some habit. It was a concrete commitment to dismantle an entire empire built on questionable decisions, to return fortunes acquired by trampling on those who trusted him, to publicly acknowledge mistakes that had been carefully hidden for years. The moral weight of this decision was overwhelming, because fulfilling it meant losing the control that had taken a lifetime to achieve. It meant giving up status, an impeccable reputation, the respect that came from fear. It meant choosing redemption over self-preservation. Now, here's something many people don't understand about promises made on the brink of death. They're not like the ones we make at New Year's and forget in February. They carry a different weight, a moral authority that can't be ignored, because they were ripped from the truest place within us. They are the only decisions made when it's no longer possible to lie, not even to oneself. And this particular promise had consequences that would extend far beyond just one person. Against all medical expectations, the heart began beating strongly again. The recovery was slow, painful, but it happened. And that's exactly when the real battle began. Because returning to life means returning to reality, and reality was full of people who had no intention of letting that promise be fulfilled. The first signs came from those closest to him. Tense meetings in the living room, worried glances that hid financial interests, whispered conversations in the hallways about fragile mental state and decisions made under the influence of medication. Allies of decades began to show their true colors. The transformation was brutal. Every step taken toward fulfilling the promise was met with fierce resistance. Lawyers questioned her sanity. Partners threatened lawsuits. Her own family, the ones who should have been supportive, turned with a cruel mentality, preserving the assets at any cost, even if it meant betraying the one who was trying to do the right thing. And in the midst of this chaos, even she, the woman who had inspired this entire journey of redemption, began to hesitate. Not because she doubted love, but because she saw the emotional price being paid every day. The central dilemma became impossible to ignore. Maintain the empire or honor the given word. Keep the power, the comfort, the forced respect that money buys, or lose everything in the name of an integrity that no one else seemed to value. Each choice exacted its price: sleepless nights, the crushing weight of guilt, battling the fear of ruin, decades-long relationships unraveling in a matter of weeks. Because the truth has a price, and that price is rarely cheap. 6 months after that early morning in the hospital, the scene was completely different. The mansion had been sold, the companies redistributed. Bank accounts that once had more zeros than most could imagine now reflected a much more modest reality. The surname that used to open doors now carried the weight of revelations, of exposed truths, of behind-the-scenes stories finally brought to light. But you know what really changed? Sleep came easily for the first time in decades. No nightmares. No waking up in the middle of the night with that suffocating feeling of guilt stuck in my chest. No looking over my shoulder, waiting for the mistakes of the past to finally take their toll. The transformation wasn't about becoming a saint overnight. It was about being able to look in the mirror and recognize the person reflected there. Because ultimately, the legacy you leave behind isn't measured in buildings with your name on the facade or inherited fortunes. It's measured in the peace you feel when you lie your head on the pillow. It's about being able to live with your own decisions without needing elaborate excuses to justify the unjustifiable. She was still there, not because of the money that had evaporated, not because of the status that had turned to dust, but because she had finally found the true version of the person she had loved decades ago. And when someone asked if it had been worth losing everything, the answer came without hesitation. I didn't lose anything. I finally gained something that money could never buy: dignity. Because the decisions we make when we are most vulnerable, when life forces us to confront who we really are, those are the ones that define true character. That touched me. So now I ask you this question: would you honor a promise made on the brink of death, even if it cost you everything you built? Think carefully before answering, because this isn't one of those theoretical questions we answer automatically. It's a question that will reach you at some point in your life, perhaps not in a hospital bed, but at some crossroads where you'll have to choose between what's comfortable and what's right. And when that moment arrives, you'll discover who you truly are. If this story resonated with you, if it somehow touched on something you've been avoiding facing, leave a like. Not for the algorithm, but because this kind of connection we've created here over these past few minutes deserves to be recognized. And if you've made it this far with me, to this last word, write in the comments. I would honor the promise. I want to see who has truly reflected on this. If you're not subscribed to the channel yet, now's the time. Because I continue to bring you stories like this that go beyond empty entertainment and make you stop and think about the choices you're making in your own life. This is the kind of content I create here, and if it resonates with you, then we need to continue this conversation. There's a video over here that perfectly complements this topic. Click on it and continue watching. See you later.